So it's lesson 8. It's our first of 2 lessons where we're working on our shopping cart. So what we want, oh, I don't have any data in here. Okay, forget that. I'll just open up my beer store. Sorry about that. I thought I had a working version of this, but turns out I don't. Okay, so let's launch our store. So we can go to our store link, and we kind of built the front page of our store last week. It was the last thing we did. We created our store controller, and in the index method, we're querying the categories table to get the list of categories, and we're using these bootstrap cards to display the list of categories in the store. Okay. So this is kind of where we left off. We can click and it loads our browse method. It passes in the selected category ID, but there's not really anything happening here. So the first thing that we want to do is work on our browse method and work on our browse view so that we can display the list of products in the selected category. I've also added a whole bunch more products to my database, which you can do if you want. So if I log in as an administrator, I wanted to have like 8 or 10 products to choose from. So I kept our existing list of categories, but I also added a bunch of products in various categories to my database. So you can add a few test products if you want to, but it should still work with only the 2 or 3 initial products we had in here. The other thing that I did do, which is probably a good idea, is I just also added a link on the homepage. Since we have taken the images from the beer store, those, we don't really have permission to do it. So I've put a note on my homepage if I publish the site that it's for educational purposes only. It has no commercial value. And I've given credit to where the images came from. If I could have taken them from a royalty-free site, I would have, but they're commercial logos, so they're not available there. Okay, so we want to open up our store controller. We want to work with the browse method. We'll also just go and check our models because we're going to start working with our shopping cart model. We created that back when we set the database up, but we haven't really worked with it. So I want to check it. We may need to make a couple small changes to it. So we've got, here was our browse method where we passed the category in from the controller. There's not really anything else happening here. We're just passing in a name and then sending it back through the view bag into the view. So we're going to overwrite this stuff, this method, so that we can actually query the database, pull out a list of related products, and display them. Just before we do, actually, I guess we can do that first. So in our browse method, first thing we need to change something in the method declaration. So let's have a look at the method header on line 41. So I'll pick craft beer. So what's the first thing I should be, do I need to change on my line 41 in the declaration of my browse method? If you look at the URL in my browser, this is indicating there's something we should probably change in this line of code. What do you think that change should be? has to do with the parameter for our browse method. Right, okay, so we're actually passing in an ID. So what should we do in terms of this method on line 41? When we wrote it originally, we were passing in the name of the category, but now, as Stella said, we're passing in the ID of the category. So we should probably make some changes in line 41. What should we change? What data type should this method expect now? It's not going to be a string. Yeah, thanks, Cole. Okay. So instead of a string, let's pass in an int that we'll call ID. So now we want to query products. So we're going to write our own query here. We'll use our context that's declared at the class level and passed into our constructor. Now we don't want all the products. We want to filter the products. If I click on craft here, then I only want the products that are in that category. I don't want the IPAs, the lagers, the stouts, the cervezas. So we can use a where method. And we'll set up our lambda expression. So where our category ID is equal to our ID parameter. We also want to sort alphabetically by product name. So this kind of does the equivalent of an SQL where clause and then order by. So we're using this Microsoft query language, link. You can see system.link expression. So this is language independent network query. So it'll get converted to SQL behind the scenes. This should give us the list of products that we want. So now how would we pass this data to the browse view? So we run our query on line 44. We have an error we'll have to deal with on line 46 in a minute. So how can we pass this data to our view? This would be on line 47. We got to make a change. Okay, Cole, we'll come back to the category. We could use the product. We could use the view bag, Alex. It's not a bad suggestion. But in that case, it's going to be untyped data. How could we pass products, which is a list of type product? How could we return that to the view? So our view would be expecting a strongly typed list of products. Cool, we'll come back to the category in a minute. And Alex, your suggestion would work. Well, let's have a look maybe at one of our other controllers. So look at our categories controller. in our index method, we're querying the database for it and getting a list. Yeah, thanks, Justine. Good suggestion. We'll return that variable in the return statement. So let's pass our products. So now our browse view is going to expect an IEnumerable of type product. Now we still need to deal with this. We no longer have the name of the category. We've only got the ID. If we want to display the category name up at the top in a heading now, we're going to need to write a quick query to go and fetch the category name based on the ID. So we'll run a second query here. We'll query our list of categories, and we can call find. Find will run a query based on a key value. So we don't need a link expression. We don't need to specify which field we're filtering. It will automatically filter based on a primary key. So this is going to be get name of selected category, find only searches, only filters on key fields. So here's our method. I'll also put in my comment above it a sample of the parameter. So it's now an integer. Before we were taking a string parameter, but now we're taking an integer parameter. So I will copy that, paste it online for you if you need it. So there's the method that you need. Take a category ID in, get the list of products for this category, sort it alphabetically by name A to Z. Then go and grab the category based on the ID from the categories table and pull out the name. So the name will stick in the view bag and our list of products will return to our view. So now we need to make a bunch of changes here. What do we need to do at the top of this file? Since we are passing the list of products here in the return statement, we've got to do something right on line 1 of our browse method. What is it we want to do here? So our view is receiving a list of products in the return statement. So what needs to go at the top of the view? So when this file loads, it knows to expect a list of products coming in from the controller. Thank you, Stella. So we'll declare a model of IEnumerable. So we're going to declare an IEnumerable of type product. This view is receiving a list of product data from the controller method. We'll try it just like this first. We don't have any code to show the products, but we'll see if the page loads correctly, and at least our selected category name should show up here in this H2 tag. So make sure you add line 1. And I'll go back and pick one of my categories. So we get our H1, and down below, now it's got this category name that we selected. I click Stout. Okay, so we're on the right track so far. But now we'll need the loop to display our list of products. So the simple way to start is we'll display the list of products using these same Bootstrap cards that we used on our index view. So you can just open up your index. I'm just going to copy this whole section because it's got the classes and see all the CSS definitions that we need, and then we're going to have to modify it. So I'm going to copy this from my index. I'm going to paste it in here, but I'll make a couple of changes to it. The first thing is I've used a variable to represent each item in the list. I called it C over here because on the index view, we were displaying categories. So I called my variable C. I'm going to rename my variable on line 11. I could leave it as C, but I prefer it to be more descriptive. So I'm going to call it P instead because it's representing a product. And then I've got to make a couple of changes down on line 17. Right, I get a couple of red arrows. C doesn't exist, so I've got to change my C variable here to P. My error goes away. I'm also going to change this instance of my C variable to P. So line 11, my variable is called P, and when I'm trying to reference it inside my loop on line 17, I've also got P here and here. Now I do have an error. How come we've got this error, and how do we fix it? There is a hint here, so what's wrong? This should be relatively easy to fix. What should we change? Thank you, John. Yep, our product model, if we look at it, it has a display name called name, but the actual property is called product name. So if I just hit the dot, we can see our property. There is no name property, but there is product name. Now this link will change as well, but I'll just leave it for now. So there's no errors in my code. So I'll try it. Okay, so now I get 3 craft beers. If I go back, I get 4 Mexican beers. So our filtering is working based on our category ID. Yep, you got it, Nick, as well. Okay, so now our link is wrong. If I click it, you can see from my status bar, it's still calling store/browse. So I don't want to call store browse in these links. Instead, in my controller, this time we're going to change on line 17. I'm going to change this to products controller. And I'm going to change the action to details. And if you remember last week, our products controller, everything is private, except we made the details page public. And this is why, because we can use it as part of our shopping cart. The details page is kind of read-only. Users can't modify a product. They can simply look at the product. So that's going to be helpful in our shopping cart. So change the controller to products and the action from browse to details in the link that wraps around your product name. And if we reload it now, so now if I click on one of these products, okay, it's my product details, I guess, is not public. So I'm going to have to go to the products controller and add the allow anonymous declaration on my product details. I'll give you all of this code so far as well. I'll paste it in case you need to update it. Right. So Ryan, good question. So our password was capital T, so test with a capital T, 1, 2, 3, and a $sign. So I'm going to log in for a minute. So this is the page we want to see. We'll have to make a few changes to it. Go back to my store. So I want to open up the products controller. And if I search for my details method in this dropdown, Visual Studio will jump me right down to that method. So again, open your products controller, click this little drop down at the top right. It shows all the methods inside. And we'll pick details. For me, that's on line 34. Yours would be similar. So above it, I'm going to add the allow anonymous annotation. So this will make our details view only public. So this way, if someone shops, they see a beer name they're interested in, they can click on it and it will open up the details view. We'll make some changes to the view, but I should be allowed in. So right above your products details method, add allow anonymous. So now if I click on any beer as an anonymous user, I'm just shopping the site. Now I can see the details of the product. We'll need to make a few changes here, right? We'll want to show the product photo. We'll want to remove the edit link. And we'll also want to add quantity box and an add to cart button. So we'll do those things on this page a little bit later. I do want to make some improvements to this page, to our browse page. It's functional, but it's missing a bunch of stuff. if you think about an e-commerce site, when you're looking at go into a category and you're seeing a list of products, it shows the product names. What other things should we add to this view? What's missing? Okay, good suggestion, Justine. Let's add the thumbnail image of the product. Absolutely, let's add that. What else should we add for each product? Yep, we want to see the price. Anything else we should add? I guess we can start here. Let's add these two things, and then we'll maybe look at another shopping cart or two and see what else should get added. So let's go back to browse. So underneath our card body, underneath the name of our product, first I'll maybe put this in an H tag. So I'm going to wrap my product names. Let's put them inside an H6. So the text will appear a little bigger. Because we want the product names. Yeah, we've got Nick, that's a good idea. We should display right here the volume and the alcohol content as well. Actually, I don't think that made them any bigger, did it? Let's try an H5. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, so now underneath our product name, let's display our price. This will use an H6, so the text will be a little smaller. So here's the new stuff. So we've got our price. Unfortunately, it's not formatted. So we can add some formatting directly in our view. So we're going to use this same currency format, 0:C. We'll call string.format. So our format is going to be currency. And then we want our p.price.
Rich, Avase is just asking, why is that 0 where it's the 0:C? What's the 0 for?
The 0 represents the first value that we are passing in, which is the price. So it's what value are we formatting with this currency format?
Got it. Thank you.
It is confusing syntax. It's quite strange. It's not intuitive at all. Okay, so we've got our price. So maybe we want the volume and the alcohol content. So under here, actually, I guess we can do it this way. Now, for the moment, also, we didn't specify units, so I'll just hard code in maybe milliliters as my units. And then I'll add the alcohol content, maybe just beside it. You could put it below if you like.
Avase is asking about a logo above the name.
We will add the logo in a minute. So yes, we do want to display the photo. So we could even go put it right here below the name. I think the name should be first, but we can put the photo below. So inside our images, product uploads, we'll have p.photo. And I think we'll try it this way. We'll see how this looks. So we'll add in the image here. You can format these values any way you like. You don't have to put them in the order I have them in. Okay, working, maybe a little large. So I'm going to add a class to shrink these images down. So here I'm going to add a class equals thumb. And then I'm going to define this thumb class in our CSS file. Once I'm done with all these changes, I will paste all the code back into the browser for you. So if there's anything you need, you can get it. So I'm going to create a class called thumb. And then let's open up our www root CSS, our site.css file. We can define a width here. So in our site.css down at the bottom, I'll create a thumb class. And I'll maybe try 70 pixels as the width. So that'll automatically scale all the images so they're exactly the same width. Let's see how this looks. We may need to adjust it a bit. Oh. My CSS is cached. There we go. So now I get reasonably sized logos. Okay, so that's looking decent, I think. You guys happy with this? Look like a reasonable shopping cart page? Okay, now let's go and look. So there's one other thing we're missing here. So we can click and get to the product details. Oh, Stella, you can either clear your cache. I opened it in a private browser because the CSS won't get cached. So all I did, quick way, was I just right-clicked my homepage link and chose open in a private window, or incognito if you're in Chrome. So doing that loads the site without any caching. So that way my CSS worked. If I keep refreshing in my original Firefox, it caches my CSS. So opening it in a private window means that CSS isn't cached. Thank you, John. That's even easier. Not for me, it's not. John, is that a Firefox command? Okay, it's probably a Chrome command. Interesting. Control Shift R. There we go. Awesome. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay, so I think this is looking pretty good. There is something else I think we should add here. Let's go to, I don't know. I did some shopping on the weekend, and in here I had an old rickety ladder that my girlfriend insisted I needed to take to the dump before I killed myself, so I was shopping for a ladder. So let's have a look at their cart page and see how it compares to ours. So we'll pick our category. Obviously, we're not going to have all the features that they've got here. And their site is running stupid slowly. Probably didn't pick a very good site to try this out on. Okay, maybe I'll go somewhere else. Forget you, Canadian Tire. Let's go somewhere else. Okay, let's search for a book on ASP.NET. So what else have they got here that we might want to include here? They've got description with a link to the product details. Yeah, Aiden, I think that's a great idea. Let's allow users to add to their cart. That's something that they would expect to see. Yes, they can go in and look at the full details. That's just ridiculous. And they could add to cart from here, but they can also add directly from the list. Adam Freeman, no relation. Just check another shopping cart as well. So we can add to cart directly from the list. No, go away. Oh, this is frustrating. Here, I'll try my category again. We'll just see what their cart looks like. Okay, so they've got product images with the name, no pricing, interestingly. They also have a product code linked to the supplier. They've got a rating. We're going to leave the rating and review out. So let's add here. We're going to need to add a little form that not only has an add to cart, but let's also add an input for the quantity. So a user can order beer directly from this page, or they could click the beer and we'll kind of replicate that little add to cart form on the product details page as well. We can do it in both places. So we'll go back to our browse. So now underneath here, we're going to need a form. So our action, it's going to go to /store, and we'll write a custom method called add to cart. So in here, we need a quantity input, an add to cart button. We also want to store the product ID in a hidden field, because every single one of these cards is going to have its own form. So when we submitted our add to cart button, we need to know which product did the user click on. So we'll just put in a comment here. Hidden field for the selected product ID. So this is going to be a type equals hidden. We'll give it a name and an ID of product ID. And our value will be this product ID from up here. Oops, and that's got to be a capital I. So then we'll create a little form group with a label, a text box, and an add to cart button. So we'll have a label that says quantity. And we'll have an input called quantity. We'll make it required, so you can't add to cart if you don't enter a quantity. And we'll set a minimum as 1, so the user can't order -5. And then we'll have our add to cart button. I think we're going to have to make a couple little tweaks to this, but we'll see how it looks. It's almost done, but I think it needs a little adjustment. I'll paste this code online for you. There you go if there's anything you need, and I will leave it up. So everything that's highlighted in blue, we just added. So underneath our volume and alcohol, we've got a little form. We stick the product ID inside it. And then we've got a quantity input. Oh, I should also add in here, I forgot this, type equals number. So we don't want any alpha characters or special characters, only numbers. So make sure you add type equals number in here as well. So how does this look? Let's see. Nick, we could add a placeholder of 1. That would be fine. From a business point, if you want to do that, absolutely you can. There's one potential drawback, not from a technical point of view, but from a business point of view. So Nick, I'll ask you, what's the downside of giving them a placeholder of 1 from a sales perspective? Yeah, the beer store doesn't really want you to buy 1. They want you to buy 21 or 31. So absolutely, if you want a placeholder there, put it in, it's totally fine. So now we get a quantity, and notice I can't go below 1 because of our min, but I can go up. So if you want a placeholder, absolutely you can add one. The other thing I'm going to do is this input is pretty wide. It's wider than it needs to be. So I'm going to define a class for a small input and set the width so that this input doesn't take up quite so much space. And the required here means I can't click add to cart without picking a number. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back to my site.css. And maybe I also want to use 70 pixels as the width of our input. So in here, I'll put after my .thumb, I'll also put a input small. So this 70 pixel width will now apply to either class, a thumbnail class or a small input. So I'm going to add that change here, and then I'll add this class name to our text box. We're almost due for a break. So I've added this to my style definition. Again, not critical. It works the way it is. If you like the wider box, then that's fine. Just leave it. So on my quantity input, I'm also going to add class equals input small. So I'll use Control F5 because I don't want it to cache my style sheet. And my quantity box should be narrower now. That's wide enough. I think it looks better. The box is wide enough. So optional to add this little class definition. Here we don't need it, but I think it looks better. So the design of this page for me is basically done now. It looks good enough. It's got all the information that somebody would need to see, the photo, the add to cart form, as well as the link to the actual product detail page if they wanted more details. Although we've pretty much included most of the details except the SKU. Okay, it is 5-3. So we're making pretty good progress with this. I will push my code up to GitHub now in case you need to check any of it. Okay, so give me a minute and I will push. Are there any questions before we take a 10-minute break?
Rich, quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Avase is wondering on the details page why the photo has the file name of the image on it.
Okay, I will explain that in just a second. Good, that is a good question. Okay, so I'm going to push my change. Just make sure.